Warning, this episode contains graphic language, Arya's choices, dark Neswata, and as always, teen angst. Also, there'll be spoilers for the entirety of Inheritance, Book 4 of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. And anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who also likes to party on boats while receiving gifts from his closest friends.
Ooh.
You do that more.
Were we supposed to bring gifts?
Yep. You guys have gifts, right?
Fuck.
I brought the boat.
Kevin, gifts? We'll talk after this. We got this.
Come on, guys.
We can pull it together.
I'll put that chest of gold I brought you guys away.
I'm Jacqui, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast that continues to make a mockery of runtime as it heads into this, the second part of our final episode, covering a saga of young adult fantasy novels. How could we have this much to talk about? It kind of strains the bounds of credulity.
Yes, no one who knows us is at all surprised, but yes. Well, we only have
not surprising, just unbelievable,
you know? True. We only have one way to be. And welcome back as we tackle our final analysis, deep dive, and what are the haters saying segment of this book.
If you ever wondered, a little BTS, if you came here for the second part of this, you're welcome. If you wondered how those interstitials came to be, all those transitions, it was basically Dane's brainchild and all the voices that he likes to make, and then we commissioned them from a real musician. It was a very fun thing to do.
Who had a lot of questions. Who was like, wait, you want me to do what?
He loved it. It was so fun. One of my favorite things we've done for the podcast, I think. But I will say, if you want a traditional recap, like in our usual episodes, please just listen to the first part of this episode. I can promise you that there we pick apart pretty much every detail to be picked apart in this last set of Inheritance chapters. But something about going in cold still feels a little strange, Dane.
Oh, no.
So I have one light question for you before we kick this second part off.
These poor people are like, please just get to it.
Light question. Easy, like,
right, here we go.
Let's do it rapid fire. Right. We've done it before.
Okay.
We could do it again.
We could do it again.
We could do anything.
All right. We could do anything.
Okay, you're sailing off.
Okay.
Leaving the land of your many, many dead fathers behind for all of eternity.
Goodbye, Papa.
A beautiful mix of melancholy and hope washes over you as you sail. What's the boat called?
My boat?
Yeah.
Not the Toledo. Not the one that's in the book.
No, your boat. Your Toledo, if you will.
Okay, here it is. You ready?
Yes.
It's Baldor's Hand. Baldor's Hand is the name of my boat.
Baldor's Hand? The one he lost?
That's the name of the boat. Baldor's Hand.
The Baldor's Hand.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
or the
fun.
Strongbow. Shot down the river. Okay, sorry.
I wrote this question, so I have let just rapid word association kind of move my spirit. And the first thing that popped into my head, I kid you not, is Gretchen. My boat's named Gretchen.
It's the Gretchen?
The Gretchen. I love like when people name their pets just like Frank.
This is Frank.
Yes.
Just like one of those dogs?
Yeah. So I am calling my boat Gretchen.
Okay.
Gretchen spirits us away into infinity.
We have Strongbow and Gretchen. It says a lot about
you
and me.
You didn't say Strongbow. You said Baldor's Hand.
I re-edited it. We're going to edit
No.
No one will know. I also went blank for a second. I was like, who do I like in this book? Anyway, but we're not going to get there. What are we going?
Well, this is it, Dane. With Aragon having left Alagasia for the rest of time and the continent firmly, if not a little alarmingly, in the hands of Neswata, Arya, but also Oric and Garshvog.
Those guys will handle it.
Yes. It can only be time for one thing, which is my final analysis segment of the original Inheritance cycle.
It's time for analysis.
I have to imagine it cannot be much of a mystery where I want to end things for this series. I talk about it almost every single solitary chance I get, so I'm really going to try to synthesize here for everybody's sanity. I think there's not a lot I really need to go back over.
Like an El Denari in the sun.
Yes. Not photosynthesized.
Sorry,
Although that would be nice too. I do miss the sun.
My basement does not get a lot of light.
Yes. I think for me, the biggest through line in all 4 of these books is coming of age. It's a fundamental part of the entire structure of this narrative. It touches almost every theme we talk about, every single character, a lot of the settings, a lot of the imagery. And I think it works really effectively to develop the characters and this world over the course of the series. And I'll start, Dane, just for you, with 2 of our best boys, the ones we have already talked about in depth from a character perspective this season, Aragon and Roran.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Aldor and Oric.
No. We've discussed their character arcs.
Oh, sorry.
If you want to do an analysis, just an extra bonus analysis in that bonus episode on Baldur Strongbow, I would be over the moon, dude.
That'd be hilarious.
So Aragon's journey out of his awkward teen years into adulthood firmly centered on him finding his values and moral compass under truly harrowing circumstances. And Christopher Paolini has talked about his decision to write Roran as a type of foil for Aragon in this sense, giving the readers another access point basically to coming of age. Roran shared, I think, so many of the pressures of Aragon's journey, albeit on like very different scales.
Yes.
The fate of the free world, I would not say was equally balanced between the two of them, but I think he came into his own as a man who started off sure of the world to begin with, and he hardened his resolve along the way. So where there are a lot of similarities in where they came from, how their journeys unfolded, I think they started at fundamentally different places, and there are some very notable differences between what befell both characters.
Same Garrow stare.
Same Garrow stare, always the Garrow stare. And by your own reckoning, right, the Marion Gaunt.
Yes.
Gaunt medical advice that sticks with you.
Perfect.
And I think the only other thing we know about Marion is a deathbed confession to Aragon. So
we know 2 pretty bleak things about her.
Yes, she died, and she also knew how to relocate arm joints.
Fun lady.
Yes. So I will link the interview. I think I also mentioned it in the Roran episode where Christopher Paolini talks about his writing choice to pose those 2 characters as foils to one another.
Yes.
I thought that was fun and interesting. But I think for me, just a little deeper on this, when you consider the intended audience for the series, I think Aragon and Roran, especially Aragon, can give teenage readers a roadmap for how to start from a solid foundation of morals, and just like props to our father, Uncle Garrow for that in the first place. But both characters start from a place of mostly altruistic morals, I would say, and they consider how to honor and develop those values and become fundamentally good people over both of their coming of age journeys. Yeah. Roran provides something of a grittier point of engagement, I think, for how that lofty proposal butts up against the real world in a lot of ways. And I think it's a huge part of the reason his character is compelling, and his coming of age is an arc that deals like in the ways you continue to find yourself even as an adult. I think Roran is still a really interesting read for me all these years later. And you've mentioned too, like you continue to find new nuance there. And I like that as a wrap up to his coming of age story from this older perspective, he's now becoming a dad as well.
Pretty cool.
But those are just 2 of the ways we've seen coming of age play out, Dane. And I think to a certain extent, Christopher Paolini may have included characters like Neswata and Murtagh almost as a warning for how people can lose their way on a coming of age journey. We've talked so much about Murtagh. I talked a little shit about him in the last episode. I got a little spicy.
You did.
And I would still say it is his failure to come of age that's cast him as this tragic figure now that the series is over. I know we both feel deeply for the horrifying hand that Murtagh was dealt. It is sad. There's no doubt about that. But I think the ways that he was unable to reflect over that course of time, he was unable to take responsibility. He was very unable to let go of his anger. He never stopped emoing, and he was never able to make the few choices that were in front of him. I think that shows a degree of stunted growth, actually, that only served to exacerbate his already awful circumstances, you know? So I think this is something that can be used to illustrate, especially to teens. Like, if you don't really work on yourself, if you're not trying to grow and change, like the bad things that happen to you in life, and they're going to happen to everybody, are going to fundamentally change you for the worse, I think. And Niswata got a classic coming of age kickoff, I think, when we got introduced to her with the death of her dad. That's a
start. That's a
that's
good
everybody.
start. That's
Yes.
everybody started.
But she too, I think for me, is more of a cautionary tale through this lens. While she, like Murtagh, was subjected to some true horrors outside of her control, I think the ruthlessness that Niswata clearly developed is cast like as a consequence to avoid at any cost as you come of age. Like, she really let things harden her and drive her to cynicism, and like she does still think she's doing the right thing, and I think in a lot of ways she fundamentally is the same person, but has allowed things to color the way she sees the world and what she thinks needs to be done.
Yes.
What all of these characters do share, however, that has, I think, cast them in this coming of age light together, is the loss of innocence we talked about as a theme back in episode 7 of season 1, when our dad Brahm died.
Oh, no.
All of these characters have watched this world change around them, and they've each faced things that have fundamentally, I think, stripped away any innocence they may have had when the story started. So soup to nuts, it's something we mentioned in the first part. I think we're left at the end of this series with much more nuanced, grittier characters prepared to contend with some of the darker realities of this world in the ways they've each honed on their coming of age journeys. Some of the characters, like I mentioned, are going to be able to face those things and I think come out making the right choices. And some of those characters I very much worry about how that pans out as Allegasia carries on. And before we come of age and finish this podcast, I think maybe between the parts of this episode was our apotheosis, Dane. I do want to talk one last time about a real strength of Christopher Paolini's writing that I think serves as a really useful mechanic for a coming of age story.
Okay. First,
I think fantasy as a genre with its requisite world building makes a particularly good vehicle for coming of age tales. I'm biased because I love fantasy, but I really do think like feeling awestruck by these epic settings and creatures and magics like genuinely lends itself to putting a reader back to how they felt in childhood, discovering the world around them.
Total agree.
And this is somewhere we always say Paolini really shines. His world building is top tier. And I think I've talked a little bit before as well about how it's fueled by his descriptive style of prose. And I think all of that really drives the coming of age home for me. So we've talked so much these 4 seasons about how much we want to go to Allegasia and see these epic landscapes and visit these legendary cities, engage in this magic system. And I think that's a real testament to Christopher Paolini's world building, obviously. And I think we've been clear about the way he also fleshes out the dark and creepy aspects of this world through his very descriptive prose in equal measure. And I think those two things in tandem highlight and heighten this coming of age narrative. I think it's all of his writing style, his world building, the dark and the light together are bringing this home for us. And some of the little recurring motifs and imagery I think he uses also started sinking into me as I thought more about this as a good tool to illustrate this concept as well. Even just a look, I think, through all 4 books' chapter titles will show you how often Christopher Paolini returns to storms, returns to ideas of darkness versus light, returns to things like sunrises and sunsets to illustrate really big moments in this series. I think that obviously hints at something very epic, something sweeping. I think it puts us in a mindset to think about black versus white, good versus evil, morality, which, as we talked about with Aragon and our big themes, greatest hits, analysis, greatest hits, is a driver of a coming of age tale. And I think where I end up is that this wholesome, like, emotional cycle of like world building, fueling coming of age, fueling more world building, fueling more coming of age. I think that is the reason fans like us connect so deeply with this world and its characters and want to return to it time and again and like find new things every time they read this book.
Dig into it.
Yeah. And I think every time I've read the first 3 books, I have found new things. I think we've talked quite a bit. Sometimes the timelines get a little fuzzy, but like between where we started,
getting old.
I know, between where we started as kids and like when this last book came out. But
Yeah.
as I've talked about, not having picked the series up for a reread since 2011, it feels so different to me, not just because I forget a bunch of stuff, but I can pick so much more up out of it. I think that's another thing Christopher Paolini has mentioned. Like, even over the course of writing it, he felt very differently about characters.
Yeah, I think that comes through. And I think it matches
Yes.
kind of what you're saying in your analysis here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a lot of the things that maybe can seem goofy about these books or can be problems, I know you'll get to them in the deep dive in haters. I think there are some real strengths of Christopher Paolini's that make this a successful book. And I think the fact it has so many fans and so many people who love to hate it.
Yeah, I think part of the hate of the book is actually just people loving it. I think, I didn't really understand the sporking so much, but I think going back to what you're saying, I think people, even if they didn't like it, wanted there to be so much more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think it is in the line of what you're saying. There is something grand here. There's something that works. There's a combination of, there's that je ne sais quoi we've been talking about the last few episodes that I think people are just enamored with. And I think, who doesn't like some dragons?
Everybody likes dragons.
Yeah. Yeah, and the cast of characters, like you said, are people we can grab onto, and then I think you grow with as you reread as you get older.
Yeah. I mean, look at how much differently we're talking about Murtagh than we did when we first picked up the series and decided to cover it on the podcast, you know?
Betrayed my boy.
You really have.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We all grow.
grow.
He's made some bad decisions,
I
but
have
we have a
moved.
whole other Murtagh book.
Yes, and I've moved from a black and white character to someone who has nuance.
He does have nuance.
Yes, nuance.
Look at him go. Nuance. Deep nuance, Dane, do you think?
Let's get into my deep dive.
Deep dive.
For this final deep dive of the original series, let's talk about Neswata.
Okay.
She's a favorite of ours and definitely a fan favorite as well. Our
Yes.
Queen President led the Varn to victory
Yes.
and now rules the Broadring Empire.
Yeah. What?
Are the kids still calling it that?
I don't know. I was just thinking, is that what it's still called?
I believe Paolini might be setting her up as a future villain, despite what the land is called. And let's dive into why every time I've leave this final book thinking about where her alarming character development goes from here.
Okay.
Nasawata appears changed at the end of the series. She seems a bit worn down by the war, and I would say a shade more cynical than she was back in Eldest.
A bit.
Must be the torture, eh?
That'd probably do it, yeah.
That would make it real pessimistic, I think. I think that we see a glimmer of an alternate outcome for that cynicism at the
Okay.
council meeting when Aragon notes that she looks like she may want to just give up for a moment.
Yeah.
But we know that ultimately that doesn't happen, and we're left to grapple with the hardened Nasawata that assumes the leadership of the free world.
Okay.
At the end of this book, Nasawata poses several troubling questions to Aragon. First, she asks if he will bind the Imperial Army and stubborn, resistant nobles with magic oaths to her, much like Galbatorix had done.
Yes.
This is the first sign that something different might be at play with Nasawata, or at the very least that she's a bit more sinister than she had originally appeared.
Yeah.
Forcing people into magical bondage is, to be quite direct, evil. It is just one step away from slavery.
Uh-huh.
It is the theft of free will,
Yes.
a real way of putting your will above others, and frankly, the vibes are not immaculate, Jacqui.
And we all know wars are won and lost on vibes, so it makes sense that kingdoms are kept and
Yeah.
destroyed on vibes, Dane.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you there. Nasawata then requests that Aragon take charge of Duvrangagata to assist her in monitoring the magic users within her realm using the name of names. It appears that our Queen President perspective may have been slightly influenced by her conversation with Galbatorix.
Do you think it was that, Dane, or do you think she just listened to your deep dive?
I like to think she listened to my deep dive.
Very persuasive, upsettingly persuasive. He
Well-
had some points.
While she's already held some concerns about those with access to magic, now tasked with rebuilding the human empire, Nasawata seems to be recognizing that perhaps some of Galbatorix's ideas were not as absurd as she once believed.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, she may now believe it's imperative to control magicians by any means necessary.
Uh-oh.
We get an insight into how serious she is about this when she says, quote, "We have to do this, Aragon, and we cannot afford to wait. Look at the havoc Galbatorix wrought. Magicians are the most dangerous creatures in the world, even more dangerous than dragons, and they have to be held accountable. If not, we'll always be at their mercy."
You know what I find a little interesting about that?
What?
Why do you think she says we?
I think
It's such a weird thing to say to a magic wielder, specifically the magic user that you want to be the new Galbatorix of your magic using community. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally do. I honestly, and this is gonna give you a little insight into my brain, guys. I think she's just a good manipulator.
Yeah.
And when you bring people on your team, you use Wheeze in their name, and I think we're watching it in real time.
I had the same thought.
Yeah, which is also a little sinister, but
Yeah.
it also brings us to the plan Nasawada lands on at this series' conclusion, one that I believe will ultimately be her undoing, unfortunately. She plans to transform Duvranger Gata into a wizard police force,
Yep.
mandating that all magicians in the new empire join. They will then be required to take oaths and share their information, bolstering the organization's power. When Aragon questions how she'll manage so many, Nasawada replies, perhaps with spells and scrying mirrors, so that we can track their whereabouts and supervise their use of magic, lest they use it to better themselves at the expense of others. And for those who resist, she added, quote, then we see to it that they make amends for their crime, and we have them swear in the ancient language to give up the use of magic. When Aragon probes further about her plan, if they refuse, Nasawada responds, if I force them to submit to oversight, many will hate me for it. However, I think you will agree with me that it's better to protect the majority of my subjects at the expense of a few. Protecting the majority at the expense of a few has been the excuse for a lot of horrific things.
Yes. Well, it's one of those, Galbatorix style, truth can be at the heart of something that ultimately can become a big problem, because on balance, when you do have a society, those are decisions that leaders have to make sometimes, but not like this.
Not like this. And I just want to say before I continue on, I don't think that this is not a problem. I think Nasawada is right.
Yeah.
The magicians are a problem.
Yes.
I think magic is inherently a problem.
Yeah.
But I do think this might be the wrong way to handle it.
Authoritarian police state is maybe a bigger problem than the imbalance of magic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The most damning part, however, comes at the end, when Aragon essentially accuses her of attempting to bind all magic users to her will. Mm-hmm. She responds, quote, for the good of the many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that argument was not only Galbatorix's reasoning to Murtagh and Nasawada, but it has also been the argument of many dictators and tyrants in the real world. It's a tough look.
It's a really tough look. It's one of those things, too, I think in this section, when you're parsing through, because we get so little of this viewpoint from Nasawada, I do think it was well set up in her interactions with Galbatorix, some of the things she said before that.
Yeah.
But when push comes to shove and we have to wrap up the series, there's not a lot here, and so I'm really drawn to, because it's so interesting, really parse through the details, I think, when you're looking at a tough character, details matter. And I think the fact that, when she says that line, when she drops that line, she does not blink at him, and Christopher Paolini goes out of his way to let us know that, I was like, oh, uh-oh.
Well, so that's the interesting thing about this, is the way that Christopher Paolini wrote it. It's he's clearly getting at a thing here.
Yes.
And it's if we start breaking down and parsing it out, it's kind of gross. I mean, think about this in the real world. This is straight up spying and forced obedience.
Yes.
Whether it's necessary in a world like this is another story, but to that point, it seems that the elves have it mostly under control.
Yeah.
Which suggests it doesn't have to be this way. And there are several other practical reasons this is a bad idea. People don't like having their free will taken away, being tracked, or making binding oaths. Most importantly, most people don't like being treated as if they're villains or criminals for not joining your organization.
Yes.
We see these sentiments reflected by one of the most powerful magic users we've encountered in the story during Angela's farewell to Aragon.
Yeah.
She says, quote, stay, how can I stay, when Nasawada seems intent on spying on every magician in the land? Yeah. She gave him a look. I disapprove very much. I will not be treated like a child who has done something naughty.
Yes.
That's what she's expressing.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty clear that this plan is headed for disaster. It's also a prime motivation for people, notably magicians, to start hating Nasawada and maybe even begin plotting against her.
Yeah.
Not a good look for a Hard Queen president who led us to victory.
That'd be bad.
Perhaps she was better suited for wartime leadership, and now that there's peace, we need someone a bit less, intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Dark Orin wasn't the worst. Regardless, I'm just kidding.
That guy has an alcohol problem.
That guy sucks. Regardless, I find this development incredibly intriguing. With more books on the horizon, especially with Murtagh back in the picture.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if the issues resurface. It's such a tough decision it's such a tough direction for Nasawada to take.
Yeah.
But then again, we do know for an absolute fact, and we all agree, and I can hear you having my back, everybody listening, that she did, in fact, and on multiple occasions, try to off our boy Roran. So maybe we shouldn't be too shocked.
A thing everybody universally agrees about.
100%. Everyone agrees. Right, Kevin? Yeah, Kevin agrees. We all agree.
I will say I'm not touching that.
She agrees, everybody.
I have a bit of a different perspective on that. A bit of a different read for me. No, I just think also at the end of the day, like, this is sinister. This paints Naswada in a really tough light at the end of this series. And I think, like you said, that is exactly how it's written. That is what we're supposed to draw from this. And I think maybe it's a big part of the reason why especially fans who are older and continue rereading the series do love Naswada so much. She is one of, like, not that many very complex characters who makes a turn from light to dark and, like, has a lot of layers in her story that feed into this. And I think she's really fun and interesting to read. I mean, she's badass, she's competent, and that makes her a scary proposition for a dark character.
It reminds me of, like, two characters from the Wheel of Time, which we've gone back to a bunch, but it reminds me a little bit of Egwene in that story. I think there are a lot of people who love Egwene. If you watch the show, you probably already like Egwene.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people who also don't like Egwene, and I think it's exactly because she is she's kind of like Naswada in that she's not all good, she's not all bad. It seems there's some fear. There's some, like, you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of Egwene's charm. I also think the same thing could be said for Matrim Coffin. That character is a character who a lot of people have trouble with for various reasons, but a lot of people do like because he is, for a lot of his faults, for a lot of things that are just really wrong with him, he also has a lot of things that are really interesting and really good. And so balancing horrible pieces of a person against really good or amazing feats or morals, even if they're opposite, right? It's very interesting, and I think it makes compelling characters, which is what you're talking about with Naswada.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even like Logan Nightingfingers from like Joe McCromy, right?
Yeah, I think they're the kind of characters that do stick with you,
Yes.
and I think that's especially between rereads what makes, like, early series Naswada so much fun to come back to, because you're like, oh man, when she was fun, and she's about to get so real so soon.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's the people who love Sirius Black or Snape or Chade from the Far Siege. I mean, we could go on and on.
Yes.
The characters that most people do love are these characters that aren't all good or all bad, and are also competent.
Watching them turn.
Yeah, or they have a switch, which is really interesting.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, so I don't hate it.
No.
But you know who
love
hates?
it, in fact.
The haters!
Actually, you should do your research, Have you even read it? How you pronounce it?
What are the haters saying?
No, there is an index in that, right?
This is a really derivative.
Just a copycat.
Here we are, haters. We've made it all the way to the end. Can we not let this feud between us die? Or must we continue our eternal war of hate? Who are we kidding? Of course we can't let this go. We need each other. It's the only time we feel alive.
Oh my god.
For better or for worse, we're stuck together, you and me, haters. You are the Helen to my Jode, the Arya to my Aragon. Hate is sometimes stronger than love. So in a lot of ways, we love each other. Well, I think I might have revealed too much about myself.
You know that's got to be the case when the Galvatorix inflection starts creeping into the monologue.
Well, we're going to breeze right on past that and get into what you haters are upset with here at the end of this book of the original series.
Okay.
It's Aragon's need to leave Alagasia.
Yeah.
It's the love story not coming together, and it's the overall sad tone of the ending.
Okay.
That's why all you little haters are upset. Some of your biggest series-wide gripes, and we're going to get into it today.
Okay.
So let's tackle these one at a time. I'll start with what I find to be the easiest point to explain. Why Aragon leaves Alagasia. Now, I know that you haters wouldn't dare forget my deep dive from Spirit Quest episode 7 this season.
I still remember that.
That was just 3 episodes ago.
Yes.
That was just 3 episodes ago, you silly gooses.
Yes.
I know you didn't forget what I had to say about the dragons and riders returning to this world, so I won't cover all of that again.
Mm-hmm.
We all agree we cannot have the wild or bonded dragons in Alagasia.
Yes.
But I know how many of you cannot understand why we can't just take them to Vorengard again.
Yeah.
But I will say that, to a certain extent, I have never really understood that myself.
Okay.
But while doing research for this podcast, I found an interview on Shirtagold.com where Paolini tackles this Vorengard question.
Oh, cool.
And I'll link it in the show notes. But Paolini says, quote, The contamination on Vrongard goes far beyond just fallout of the sort that Galbatorix's death produced in Eurobane. The battle between the Riders and the Forsworn loosed all sorts of forces on the island, many of which were responsible for the creatures such as the Shadow Birds and the Burrow Grubs. It would take a prohibitive amount of time and energy, even with the help of the Eldenari, to attempt to restore the island. And even the most dedicated efforts would surely miss some pocket of darkness. In short, it's really not a healthy or safe place to stay. Not to mention that there are people of some sort already living on Vrongard, as Aragon saw during his visit.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if any of these things really make me feel better, so I am sure there are others of you that feel the same.
Yeah.
I can hear you haters hating. Aragon has the name of names, essentially all the knowledge in the world, and the power of essentially a god at this point. It seems like he should be able to clean Vrongard and should be able to kill some of the Shadow Owls and Burrow Grubs.
Yes.
As for the people on Vrongard, who knows? They might be able to be residents of his new dragon home, or they could probably be paid to move with an infinite amount of money and connections that Aragon has access to. I don't know. This never really landed for me, but the author has said none of those things are possible, so it's out. And that's that. And we're just going to have to live with that.
We listened to Inheritance God,
Yes.
Christopher Paolini.
Paolini is the god, and
Dad
he makes the choices.
told us, and we pay attention to Dad. I guess, too, it's something we've seen throughout the series, something we poke fun at here and there, but, might actually be a factor in this. I think Christopher Paolini, especially when it comes to horses, has, maybe, misjudges distances a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it could be possible that, Vrongard as represented on the map does not necessarily encompass the whole size of it. Maybe it's just a sheer size problem. Maybe Vrongard is too big to do all of this stuff.
Yeah, maybe,
reasonably.
Maybe we got some scale problems there, which I could see that as a selling point.
That's consistent.
Yeah,
that's foundational in the lore, Dane.
Yeah, I could go with that. Look at you. You're already fighting these haters off. You got it. So he has to leave because he has to find a place similar to Vrongard that is isolated from people, and this part of it does make sense for me. I think if it can't be Vrongard, it would have to be a distant land. I'm on board there.
Yes.
But I wouldn't be me if I didn't mention that I still feel like Paolini only wants to do this because he wrote a prophecy back when he was 15.
Okay.
And this is a bit of a bummer. But I also think Aragon leaving is good for any future stories because he's going out on a new adventure, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
This is only the first tale in the very long life of Aragon Shadeslayer and Saphira Brightscales.
Yes.
With that defense against you, my beloved haters, buttoned up, the next ending problem you and some fans seem to dislike is the ending between Arya and Aragon and how there really is no payoff to the tension built for so many books.
As soon as I started to defend against the haters, here I am.
Yes, you joined them.
Joining their ranks.
Now, I don't ship their relationship personally. I know you don't either. But a lot of people did. And Paolini did drag this on for 4 books. So the fact that he doesn't end with anything but a promise to maybe date, possibly, in the future is not great for the people that got on board.
Yeah.
And I understand that to a certain extent. I also understand that the other half of fans or the haters that weren't into it, such as myself and you, wanted this to end with a friendship and a mature understanding that Aragon is far too young and that their personalities are far too different and their relationship doesn't have to be romantic.
Yes.
But that clearly doesn't happen either. And I mean, they share their true names while the dragons fuck, for God's sakes. I mean, it does not end there.
I think even Christopher Paolini says in an interview, he didn't want to make them be physically intimate with each other because what he chose is more intimate. And I was like, don't do us like that, Christopher.
Yeah.
Let us think they're going to be friends and that's it.
Yeah. It somehow manages to land for neither group of people, I think, or very few people at least. Now, this may be a function of something I found in yet another interview Paolini did that will also be linked in the show notes, where he says, quote, basically, I realized that the characters weren't the people I thought they were back when I was 15.
Okay.
And that if I forced Aragon and Arya together, and it would be forcing them, I would end up breaking Arya's character.
Okay.
So you heard it here from the man himself. He grew up and realized the character herself would have hated it.
Yes.
Props to him for doing that.
Yeah.
I personally think that might be a major problem with Arya in the story writ large.
Okay.
Paolini wrote characters he himself misunderstood, creating enough problems in the relationship that some people dislike it in the first place, and others who like it dislike the way it had to be resolved.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a mixed bag there, but if you don't care about the romance either way, you may have hated Arya choosing to be both a queen and a writer, and not going with Eragon to help rebuild the writers.
Why would anyone hate that, Dane?
I'm thinking I'm going to save most of my hate and most of the haters' issues with this for the series wrap-up bonus episode.
Okay.
That will be out in like a week.
Okay.
But this is my single biggest problem with the whole series personally. And I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Arya or Eragon's characters, but honestly, mostly Arya's character.
Yes.
And that's the problem. I think sometimes I've talked a lot in this series and made fun of Arya a lot. And I think a lot of that has to do with the characterization of a lot of this stuff, not her character, which are very different. And so I think Arya's cool. And I think Arya could have been even cooler, I guess is my thing.
Yes.
And when she's not, it's made worse. So
yes, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, I can immediately understand. We talk about time and place issues, I think, a lot when it comes to the series sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think especially for a young author like Christopher Paolini, I'm so happy that he, in an interview, was just like, oh, she changed so much over the course of the series to me. I think it reads very much like that in the books.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent, like, props to him for wanting to have this like badass female character.
Yeah.
And as like a 15 to 25-year-old, as these books were coming out, like, props to him for growing to realize that this was not the end for her. And then I think if you reread through that perspective, you can see a lot of how his opinion of her changed over time. You know?
And I think we're reading a book that I think most authors don't have to go through this problem. I think most authors don't write a book when they're a teenager.
Yeah.
And then have to like adjust it as an adult.
Yes.
And I don't think they have to like live with the consequences of that because it's probably not a bestseller that everyone's obsessed with. You know what I mean? And so I think that totally is fine and totally part of this, which leads to the final issue for some of you haters. And again, some fans as well.
Ooh.
The sad tone of this ending. To this, I would say that I understand what you mean. It's nice to have our childhood heroes have those perfect endings.
Yeah.
It's nice to see the payoff for all the hard work and sacrifice they put into the adventure we love so much. But to you all who feel that way, truly, I think Eragon got what all heroes want. He succeeded at his goals. He grew as a person. He defeated the great evil. He's going to be remembered for all time and glory. And he kept most of his friends and family safe.
Yes.
And is going to start his next great adventure.
Yeah.
He didn't get the girl, but frankly, he's going to live forever.
Yes.
So there's still a chance.
Boo.
And also, this is real life. Like, come on, snowflakes. Buckle up, buttercup.
Oh, my
life
God.
isn't all sunshine and rainbows. You don't know what life is? No. I'm kidding. It's bittersweet. But sometimes a little tragedy is good for the soul, as all things come to an end.
Agree. I like a little bittersweet ending. I mean, both of us just famously liked straight up emo books,
Yes.
just like tragic, heartbreaking books.
Yeah, we're a big fan. We're a glutton for punishment, you and me. And you know, with that thought, this journey has come to an end for us.
Yeah.
We have finished the end of the original series. We did it.
Not to be believed.
Yeah, the haters didn't bring us down.
Yes,
Yeah.
2 parts. The series broke us from 1 episode to 2.
I know. Could you imagine if we just kept going in that original
No.
episode?
No. I think that was a good call.
It's like 3 hours.
At least needed to get up and stretch. Speaking of behind the scenes, I hope you all came back for part 2. So many
Yeah.
fun little drops on here.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm excited to keep reading in the world of Allegasia, but
Yeah.
I'm also, I think, like, ready to start stretching our wings. I think it was fun to start this podcast with something we both are so connected to from childhood. And I think wrapping it up and going on this journey and working so hard for this podcast, both of us pushing so far outside of various comfort zones and
Yes.
working together for the first time on a project, like, it's been a lot of upheaval, but I'm like, I think we fucking we're in a groove. Like, we're still learning, we're still adjusting things little by little, but I'm ready to like take something else on, I think.
Yeah, me too. And I'm like you said, I think we had a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
And it could have ruined friendships, but it didn't. And I think it's been fun. And you know what? I wouldn't if we had done a different series. I think in hindsight, I think in hindsight, I would have been bummed we didn't do this. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because I feel like I don't want us to do only like young adult novels.
No.
And so if we had started out with more gritty and like an older series, I think that would have been jarring to come back. I think the moment maybe would have sailed.
Yes.
So I'm glad that we started here because
Yeah.
it, for me at least, it's kind of the foundation of my fantasy love. So,
Yeah.
and I know that you love this as a child too.
Yes.
And even just among us, it's the thing we like talked about first.
Yeah.
So that's pretty
strange.
cool.
All that time ago.
Yes,
Is
life.
it 2 full decades now?
We don't have to talk about how old we are. We don't have to.
I think it is officially.
I think it is 2 decades.
I got that for you, Dane.
Yes, I'm feeling. I still have a faux hawk though, and I'm hanging on to youth.
It came back, which I think is fun. I think everything circles back in the end, you know, Dane?
Everything's a
Aragon,
circle.
faux hawks, soon frosted tips. I'm trying to incept Dane into getting frosted
I'm not
tips
getting
late in
those.
life. It'd be really fun. You have really thick, lustrous hair that could hold up to bleaching, Dane.
Well, and also I just want to say, if you are on this bonus episode and you've listened to this whole thing, thanks for being with us. It's been fun. I mean, we're going to talk about this more in the bonus episode, but but just I'm going to keep saying thank you through these 3 episodes because I appreciate you guys.
Yes, it's been so fun for us. When we started putting these out, we were like, well, if nobody ever listens, at least we had fun doing it. But the more and more of you who tune in really like fuel the fire. We're like, oh my God, okay, we have to actually like make this good. We have to try. We have people out there, and like every single message we get, every comment, every like interaction we've had with listeners has been above and beyond positive. You guys are the best in the game. If you're out there, you're all fun, kind people who also like to. I've noticed how many long messages we get from some of our listeners, Dane. I feel like that's a little like recognize like.
I was say like calls like.
I think so. But I think at this, the bitter end of the original Inheritance Cycle, final episode, 2-parter, I think we plan to let everybody know what's on deck for us in the podcast over the next couple of months.
Yep.
First and foremost, we obviously vented a ton of our thoughts on this series and this book in particular on this episode and its predecessor. But if you know us at all by now, you do know that we still have more to say.
Oh, so much.
We've mentioned, obviously, a couple times now, the fabled bonus episode we decided to do because we do still have some listener questions. We have some headcanons we want to get into. We have some favorites. We have some least favorites. Might get a little spicy. And of course, we have some red string wall theories we want to explore over the course of the entire series. So we want to do a little more encompassing in the bonus episode. Very spoiler heavy.
Yes.
And so I think we're planning to put that out in like 2 weeks, 1 week.
Yeah. Whatever feels good.
Yeah.
Probably a week.
Let's do it next week.
Let's give the people what they want. Bonus episode will come out next week then,
Perfect.
and we'll go dark for 2 weeks after that and get a bit of a break.
Okay.
I think we deserved it. I think we'll have a trailer come out sometime in those 2 weeks after that, and then after that, I guess we're doing 3 episodes of The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm.
Yes.
Then we have another 2-week break, and Murtag should be coming out sometime around the end of July and the start of August. And after that, we're still interested in getting your suggestions for the next book series or standalones that you guys want.
Yes.
So we haven't decided. So if you're listening to this, please, very quickly, the sooner you send us stuff, the sooner we can kind of put that all together.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's it. Thank you for listening. Email us at isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com with questions, feedback, and recommendations for other books to cover on the show.
Yes, and if you've made it to the end of the original Inheritance Cycle, that means that on our next episode, you're ahead of your homework.
Yeah.
On our bonus episode, we're going to be covering all 4 books. So you've done the reading. Just tune in to enjoy.
Is
Thanks,
this
everybody.
just fantasy?
Bye.
We're just 2 nerds and we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.
Hi, Helen Longshanks here to tell you about my handy hanky, a marvel of Alleghasian craftsmanship, woven from the finest dwarven linen by the hands of Durgrim's Quan themselves. They pray over every strand of this luxe textile before it's shipped hassle-free right to your door. This magical hanky can absorb spills and messes with the strength of 10 cold chieftains. Isn't that right?
That's right, Helen. Billy Mays here.
From the makers of Helen's Handy Hanky, it's Bluggarm's Bluggy. The blanket with a scent you can feel. Tired of struggling with regular partners that always let you down? Maybe you're all alone now that your man is putting down a rebellion, the Queen President. With the Bluggy, you can stay warm and cozy while feeling the lustful passions you lost years ago. Whether you're reading a book, churning butter, or relaxing on the porch, the Bluggy is the perfect solution for a lonely heart and an even lonelier night. Order now and you can get the Bluggy paw accessory that vibrates. And Helen guarantees you won't miss another friend again.
Helen Longshanks Financial Advice Products.
Greetings, I'm Helen Longshanks, and I'm not ashamed to say that I understand the struggles of financial hardship, having faced them once myself. When my husband squandered my father's fortune supporting rebel terrorists, I was left with very little. But through sheer cunning, war profiteering, a little elbow grease, the laws of attraction, and a meager capital injection of gold from Aragon Shadeslayer, I managed to rebuild my wealth and secure my financial future. Now, I wish to share my knowledge and experience with you at a price.
Join Helen Longshanks, a woman of the people, as she helps you achieve financial freedom and peace of mind. With her financial advice products, you'll learn how to manage your money, acquire the right property, and make savvy farming investments, and plan for the future.
Don't delay in taking control of your finances. Order Helen Longshanks financial advice products today, and you too can pull yourself by your bootstraps to the Beor peak of financial freedom.
Order now and receive a special bonus gift, a signed copy of Jode Longshanks' book, My Time with a Dragon Rider. Products can be purchased by visiting our offices in Tier or sending your message boy to Helen's Trading Company. Helen Longshank Financial Advice Products, because financial freedom is within reach. Not insured by the VFDIC. For the makers of Helen's Handy Hanky and Blood Arms Bluggy, it's Helen's Healing Tonic.
Hooray! Meet Helen's Healing Tonic. With our proprietary tonic, you can be your own personal magical medic. Helen's Healing Tonic can grow back a receding hairline, put a pep in your step, and even clear those pesky hangovers, all in just seconds. Whether you're a farmer with calloused hands, a merchant who's used to the finer things in life, or a soldier in dire need of life support, Helen's Healing Tonic can handle it all with ease. Say goodbye to dubious herbal remedies and hello to Helen's Healing Tonic, the Varden Hero Essential you never knew you needed. Call now! Yeehaw!
These claims have not been evaluated by the VFDA. Helen's Healing Tonic is not right for everyone and does have side effects. While taking Helen's Healing Tonic, you may experience temporary burrow subsidence, spontaneous rock lifting, or even the ability to speak and understand Asian language. Other side effects may include ward failure, the growth of pointed teeth, and the ability to eat sunlight. Some users have reported hair color change and enhanced night vision. Common side effects also include nausea, headache, dizziness, fatigue, diarrhea, constipation, dry mouth, insomnia, drowsiness, and death. Please note, Helen's Healing Tonic is not suitable for everyone and may cause allergic reactions to certain magical creatures such as werecats and dragons. Speak with your local healing magician to see if Helen's Healing Tonic is right for you.